Welcome to our apple day at Gilbert White's garden in Selborne. You may think to yourself, what was the origin of the apple? The apple, would you believe, was found in Kazakhstan, that's between China and Russia, 750,000 years ago. But apples then were small, tiny, almost like our current crab apples today. Move on a bit, and apparently there are experiments at 8000 BC to make the apple more palatable. The Egyptians in 1300 BC planted orchards. And from them, when the Romans and the Roman Empire expanded into Egypt, the Romans then became acquainted with the apple, and it was they who introduced the apple to what was then mainland Britain when they invaded, starting in 55 BC, but with the main invasion taking place in 45 AD. When the Romans left, apples became less prominent as part of our diet and were almost forgotten about until William the Conqueror came along in 1066 and brought with him not only all his soldiers and beautiful architecture, but also, yes, apples from France, along with all the monks and monasteries. And it was in these monasteries that a lot of fruit was grown, as well as a lot of vegetables and herbs. By the time Gilbert White is taking over this garden in 1759, apples have been established in this country and are being eaten. But the number of varieties is far less than you see today. But there are notes in Gilbert White's garden calendar that he started working on apples in 1759. And he grew them all over his then garden. He also had constructed a fruit wall, which is somewhere down there and still exists. And this was in 1761, and this was apparently to grow espalier trees, because by then people realized espaliers grown against fruit walls could yield such beautiful fruits as this, which is an Orléans renette. And I'm standing under the tree now. Gilbert White employed village labor to help him with his mammoth task of growing, but he also grew other apples, some of which we won't recognize, such as the knobbly russet. Looks very unattractive. You wouldn't find that in Sainsbury or Tesco, but it makes beautiful pies, as our cook Maha will testify. And they keep a long time. Unlike the Blenheim orange, which you may find in some supermarkets, and although this isn't a particularly good specimen, as you can see, it's a very big apple and makes a beautiful eating apple as well as a cooking apple. But then we come to varieties with which you won't be familiar. Knobby russets, for instance. How unattractive is that? But my word, given the right conditions, a cool, tart place, and temperatures between 10 and 13 degrees C, that will keep for 5 or 6 months. Or good old French crab. Again, both these make beautiful cooking apples, because I've been conducting experiments at home with the apples at Gilbert White's garden. Gilbert White was also into grafting his apples, and grafting was a technique whereby you could take one variety of apple, put it on a very vigorous rootstock, and grow it to whatever size you wanted and to whatever height as well. Interestingly, at the same time as Gilbert White lived, between 1720 and 1793, there was a gentleman called Thomas Allen Knight who carried out extensive pollination experiments to increase the variety of apples, so much so, but by the time we come to the 19th century, nurseries are springing up all along the south of England, offering all sorts of different varieties of apple. And so we come to modern times, when of course we import a lot of our apples, but we should be growing a lot more apples at home because our climate is ideal for apples. It's damp, we have occasional dry and sunny and warm periods, but you do need winters like ours, especially the harder winters, for the apple tree to take a rest, just like we need a rest.